You say you're fine, but I can see right through. You're holding your secrets for way too long. This can't keep going on. With every lie, they keep on hurting you, getting away with everything they do. This can't keep going on. No, we're gonna find them, and I'm gonna fight for you. They better start hiding. We'll be running with the lions, lions. We'll be running with the lions, lions. They can't run, they can't hide. We won't stop until they're down. We'll be running with the lions, lions.
Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday, and welcome to another episode of Gloves Off. Well, I have to say it is a hot one here in San Diego. I think it went up to 80 degrees, but I have to say, in comparison to Florida, at least it's not so humid. So I am very grateful for that. But it's interesting how we get used to really cool weather here in San Diego to the point that I'm complaining about heat, which I never thought I would do. So today I'm really excited about our show. And again, I always like to thank the people who have been watching, and I always am so thrilled that you're back here watching again. And for those of you who are new, Gloves Off is really a show about people who show up courageously in the world, want to make changes, do different things, show up authentically. And each week I showcase somebody who's doing exactly that. And a lot of the times I like to get into conversations that help us understand one another better, because in this day and age, I feel like there's a lot of misunderstandings amongst all of us. You know, we come from different backgrounds, different experiences, different cultures. And one of the goals of the show for me is to kind of bridge that gap, to let us all see that we're not so different. We may look different, we may come from different backgrounds, we may have differences, but we are not all that different. So anyway, so if you're new to this show, I hope you'll keep watching. So today I'm actually going to interview Wynn Austin. So she's from Vietnam, and she's like me, came over when she was very, very young. But, you know, we've had conversations before, and we've had very similar experiences and challenges and whatnot. And I think we have such great conversations to speak about today. But the highlight really is that, you know, when you are an immigrant from another country, your food really gives you so much of this nostalgia and this connection with your homeland. So she had gone through some health challenges, which led to her not really being able to enjoy the food that she really loved, which became a problem. And then she decided to create her own brand of sauces. So it's pretty cool because, you know, a lot of these Asian sauces aren't really that good for you, Indian sauces included. So I think it's really a cool story. I can't wait to deep dive into it. But before we do that, I want to thank our sponsor, Elevated CPA, for their continued support. All right, everyone, welcome back. So I think we should just dive into this and bring Wynn and get her on here. Hello, Wynn, and welcome to Gloves Off.
Hi, Dr. Kopana. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no problem. Did you like that like jazzy intro? That's
I
new.
love it. Like
Professional.
I did used to do like boxing and stuff, so it's got me all riled up.
Good. I was like, I
Yeah,
need something with pizzazz to introduce
I
my
love
guests every week on the show. So I am so glad that you're here with me. And I remember actually we had talked about that because I always do a little pre-interview with everyone that I decide to have on the show. So everybody's vetted. It's not like I will just take anybody on the show. So I actually met Wynn through her fiance, who is my vet, and I had just moved here and I needed a vet for my dog Enzo, my little furry fur baby. And he was just so nice. And I mean, I was like, oh, as much as I like you, I hope I never have to see you again.
it.
But during that conversation, we got to talking, and I wanted to have him on the show, but instead, he decided that I should have Wynn on the show. So here she is.
He is my number one fan. So
Oh,
yeah.
and that's exactly how it should be. So, and I have to say, Enzo was a fan too. For some reason, even when it was time for some, I think they had to take his blood or something. I don't remember what it was, but he just went right along with them. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess. And he came right back looking chipper as ever. I'm like, all right, whatever. So tell us a little bit about your story. I kind of, piqued their interest a little bit with your health challenges and stuff. So go ahead and just tell our audience a little bit about what challenges you faced and, how you got to start in your own line of sauces.
Sure. Well, I actually, back in 2016, I'm very active. Like, I play tennis, I work out, and I wasn't feeling very well. I went to the doctor. I ended up having high blood pressure, I was having anxiety, and overall, I just didn't feel good. And I really didn't want to go on prescription medication. And so my background's Vietnamese. I mostly eat Asian food, and I cooked at home a lot. So I thought we ate very healthily until my girlfriend mentioned, like, hey, why don't you try Whole 30? It kind of cleans out your system, and then that way, like, see if that makes a difference on how you feel. So I decided to take her advice instead of going to prescription medication. And so I had to cut out sugar, soy, and gluten. And after that, when I was doing that, I realized I could no longer eat any of the Asian sauces that I had on hand that I was used to cooking with and eating every day. And so, I went through Asian food withdrawal, I call it. And so I decided to try to make my own sauces. And I started with my satay, which is a Vietnamese chili sauce. And with the new ingredients I learned about on the Whole 30 program, like coconut aminos instead of sugar or soy, and using just real ingredients, like fresh ingredients, eating real food. I started playing around in the kitchen, and I was able to come up with a healthy version of my favorite Vietnamese sauce. And so during this time, Instagram wasn't that big, but I always loved to share food photos on Facebook. And I was telling people what I was doing on this 30-day clean eating and about the sauce that I made. And I was like putting it on everything, like my eggs, my salmon, my steak, stir frying veggies. And I had a lot of people reach out to me and ask me and say, oh, next time you make some, can I have a little jar? Because I'm cutting out sugar, or I'm gluten free now. Just so many people. So then I was like, I love to cook for people, and it's my love language is to feed people. So I'm like, sure, no problem. So 3 years later, I'm making 100 jars of that in my kitchen as a hobby, like staying up till 3 in the morning, jarring sauces for people. And I'm like, what is happening to my life right now?
I guess you couldn't say no to the people that were
And
asking.
it made me happy. It brought me so much joy that I did whatever it took to deliver sauce to people. And during that time, I'm not a chef. I told people I'm not a chef. I've never been culinary trained, or I have no idea about food manufacturing or how to get your product on a shelf. And the thought of it really scared me. So I would research here and there, and it was very overwhelming. So I'm like, no, 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 I'm just going to do this for fun, just for people I know. And, but then,
100 people that you know.
yeah,
Just me and 100 people I know.
right. And it was just so insane. And every time I research, I'm like, oh my gosh. But every time I try to quit and stop, I mean, people were bombarding me. Like, I'm out of satay sauce. My husband's asking me, when's your next batch? And so, it kept me back in the game. It's like, okay, maybe one more batch. I'll do one more batch and then I'll quit. And so I tell people this was an accidental business. I loved it. I just didn't know anything about it. But one thing at a time, I started learning more about it. And by the end of 2019, I went through a divorce, sold my home, and got my real estate license and launched my sauce business all in the same
Wow,
month.
that's quite an eventful year for you. Oh my God. Well, I think it's so interesting because it is really hard, especially when you don't have a commercial kitchen, to
Yeah,
be processing that much sauce and trying to like, oh my God, I can't even imagine. I
yeah,
mean, I'm the kind of person that gets stressed out making a meal for like
right.
just me.
And I knew what I didn't want. And I didn't want to
Mhm.
be stuck in a kitchen. I didn't want to be manufacturing my own sauce. So the only way I would go after this business I knew was to find a manufacturer.
Right.
And so when I would call, for like over a year, I would call people and they said the minimum was like 10,000 jars. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, okay. I'm only selling like 100 jars a month right now. But
And
then,
then they expire, I imagine, in some time. So that's a pretty big order.
and actually absolutely. But actually my sauces they have a 3-year shelf life, which
Well,
is
thank God.
really
Okay. But still,
but still,
10,000.
at the time, I didn't even know that. So,
But still, 10,000 in 3 years,
10,000.
it's a
Yeah,
lot.
that's a lot. And so then I was able to find a small co-packer at the time that was willing to help me develop the recipe for the pH level in order to have it shelf life stable. And they were willing to work with me on like the minimums. I think my first order was I think it was like 200 jars, right? So,
Mhm.
or 500 jars was like the first order, and that was more manageable. So I'm like, okay. And I remember picking up these 500 jars and thinking, oh my gosh, am I going to die with these 500 jars? Like, is anyone going to buy it? But here we are today. Wynn's Kitchen is growing, it's thriving, and we're in over 200 stores nationwide. We're in, most independent grocery stores in San Diego and Orange County, LA. Especially, the main natural grocery stores like Lazy Acres, Bristol Farms, Erewhon, Jimbo's, Mother's Market. So I feel very, very blessed.
Oh my God. I feel like we just have to give you a hand. Like amazing. Because it's not easy to, make those connections, get in the stores, et cetera, et cetera. And I know, guys, personally, like I was like, I got to try this sauce before we do the show. I mean, I've been meaning to do it. I just get lazy and don't do it. So anyway, I was like, I got to go. And so I texted Wynn and I was like, oh, what stores was it in again? And luckily I don't live far away from one of them. And I even got a aisle. So I was like, whoo, I just went in the store, beeline for the aisle, found it and left. So I did try it and it is really good. I don't like sauces that are very sugary. I mean, I'm very health conscious, so I don't like them to have a lot of salt and sugar and this
Absolutely.
heaviness.
And,
It
and
doesn't make me feel good either.
no, no. And once you clean up your diet and you eat, like you go out to eat, because when I'm desperate, I go out to eat Asian food if I'm like too lazy to cook or whatever. Afterwards I just feel terrible because
Right.
once you clean that from your diet, like we really try to eat at home a lot. We
Mhm.
eat really clean. I make even sauces I don't sell. I try to make at home a lot.
Mhm.
But our products have no sugar, no soy, and no gluten. And I've stuck with that. So any of the sauces that we make, I really stick to those values. And I've had so many people contact me and tell me, you know what, when I'm actually allergic to soy, I love Asian food and I couldn't have any Asian food. I can't eat out at Asian restaurants.
Wow.
And now with your sauces, I'm able to enjoy like Asian flavors again.
It's like a market that you didn't even know that existed, right? It just
Right.
came out of nowhere, which is awesome.
Right. And I think the more common is gluten free,
Mhm.
already by the time I started, this business and created the sauce, I already knew, gluten free is huge. People are
Mhm.
starting to learn about eating whole foods and real food. Even myself, I learned so much through that process. And now being in the natural food space, I'm like, I'm like turning to this like natural, like now I use like natural laundry detergent. Like,
Oh,
it's just all
100%.
these little changes. I mean, it makes such a huge impact in your life.
Well, and I've even gone, you probably have too, but even a step further where I really consider whether companies that I buy from are creating sustainable
Mhm.
products that are good, so I've stopped buying like laundry detergent, period, because
Right,
I can't deal with the idea that those plastic bottles are going to be in the ocean and kill our
right.
wildlife. So now I don't buy laundry detergent, and I've gone to those little sheets that you can buy,
Oh, yeah.
which are more sustainable environmentally. So they
Right,
degrade in the wash, and then the box that it comes in is also biodegradable. So I'm like,
right,
so, and I think that as human beings, we really have to be very, very conscious about what we're putting in our body and what we're putting our environment with,
right.
because we all have an obligation. And it was something I didn't care about, I'll be honest. Years ago, I didn't care. I was so
Ew.
entranced in my own life that I didn't have space to think about anything beyond that. So to
Right,
me, how I know I'm in a good space in my world is that I actually have the bandwidth to care about all those other things. And you know,
right.
even with our health conditions, like we don't realize that it just sounds basic. Oh, high blood pressure, this and that. I mean, many people are probably thinking, oh, that's not a big deal. You just take a pill. But
Yeah.
what we don't realize is that obviously I'm a physician, so
Yeah.
these things for many years. Every single one of those medications has side effects. And
Every,
our medical industry has now created drugs for the side effects. So, cholesterol drugs have side effects. So we're treating one problem, we're creating others. And everything is a trade off. There
right.
is really no better solution than to just be healthy, watch what you put in your body, and maintain a healthy lifestyle. There's just no replacement for that.
There really isn't. And I have to be honest, I thought I ate healthy before because I've always cooked most of our meals. And I made all my kids, baby food and but just so it was so shocking to me that with this 30-day experiment and which continued, now we still eat very clean.
Mhm.
But this 30-day experiment, how much I felt better. So it's not like I was sick where I couldn't go to work or I couldn't get out of bed, but it was just like, but I just didn't feel good.
Mhm.
And
You can tell when
yeah, you
you don't
don't
feel the
feel right.
vitality.
You feel foggy, your brain's foggy, you're tired, or like my anxiety was really heightened. I would just get stressed about things that I'm like, this is so strange. Like I normally don't get stressed over these like little things. And
Mhm.
that's our body under distress. It's like so like there's just so many chemicals that we're adding to our bodies. And only when I started reading labels, all the Asian sauces that I used to eat, they had warning labels on them. I was like, oh my God.
Well, honestly, so much of what we're eating, we don't really know. And if we look at, even just so many of our cultural foods that really bring us a lot of joy are not necessarily the best for us.
And
Indian
that,
food, same thing. I would say Southern cooking is also
yeah,
delicious, but not really that healthy. The cleaner we keep our diet, the better off we're going to feel, and the longer I want to say the longer we'll have that vitality is what I'm trying to
yeah,
say.
right. And it's like our lifestyle. It's like how we feel on a normal basis. Like, it's like you don't want to wait till you have to be on, you have diabetes and have to take all these prescription medication where it's not even an option. You can't go back. and reverse it, right?
Right. Right.
And I agree with you. Like I love Asian food. Like I can't live without Asian food. And so that first week after not being able to eat like the stuff that I normally eat and like the flavors I normally have, I really struggled with it. And so, but everything happens for a reason, and that's what forced me to create the sauce. And everyone used to call it the Wynn sauce.
That's so cute. I love it. I love it. So I want to hear a little bit more about your background. So
Sure.
obviously we know you like Asian food, you're Vietnamese, but you came over when you were 2.5 years old. And tell us a little bit about that.
So my uncle Frank, who is American, Frank Muse, he actually was living in Vietnam in the 70s, and he met my aunt. And this is not common in the 70s, right? And so he fell in love with my aunt, married her, and then they had both of their kids in Vietnam, and then they moved back to the United States. And so, we have the Vietnam War, of course, so times were very difficult. I like my parents talked about, um, when I was born, there was no milk, there was no formula, so they had to grind up 7 different types of beans and make milk out of that, kind of like how you make soy milk, but with 7 different types of beans, so that there's more nutrients. And they said because it's so bitter, they would add just raw sugar into the milk, and that's how I survived as an infant in Vietnam. And I was lucky because my aunt, she said she really missed her family and really wanted to bring us from, help us get out of Vietnam. And so my uncle sponsored 16 of us from Vietnam. I was the youngest. I was 2.5, and I mean, talk about my grandparents, my mom, my biological dad actually was not able to come with us. Aunts, uncles, cousins. And at the time when they started the paperwork, I wasn't even conceived. And so I think it was like a month before they were leaving that my mom realized my name was not on the list.
Wow.
Imagine. And I was the only child at the time. So they had to really pull some strings and got my name on the list. And I was able to come over with my family. We landed in Reno, Nevada. It was such a big ordeal. We made it into the Reno Gazette in 1983, April 1983. We're in the newspaper. Like, they're like, look at this Vietnamese family, like, and it was, I think those beginnings always grounds me because it was a tough childhood growing up.
Mhm.
And I think that where I am today and the work ethic I have, it all stems from, growing up as an immigrant, seeing how hard my whole entire family worked. I still speak fluent Vietnamese because my grandparents had to take care of me. My mom worked 7 days a week, and so my grandparents raised me, and they only spoke English. So at a very young age, I had to take care. I was like the translator for everybody. Like, if I need to call the electricity company, set up whatever water bill, whatever English letter that came in the mail, I kind of took care of that for my grandparents.
Wow. So you really had to grow up quick.
Very quickly, very quickly.
That really is not easy, just to be the translator for everybody. And then so your mom speaks English, but your grandmother never spoke English? Or?
Parents know, and growing up, my mom's English was not great, so
Mhm.
it's better now. But at the
Mhm.
time, I mean, I pretty much managed everything for my household, and so even for school, I would sign my own permission slip since I was like in the first grade.
That is
So,
really not easy at all. I mean, I know that, my parents, when I came over, I was 10 months old, so I was also very young.
mhm.
My parents spoke English. Actually, my mom probably didn't speak much, but my father spoke good English enough to actually get a job here. So, I didn't have it that rough, but they also made me do a lot of the calling and a lot of the speaking up for them because people just didn't understand them good.
Right, right.
So, but I don't remember doing it when I was young. I think I did it more when I was older, and then I could really handle some things for them. And they're like, "Can you just call?" And I was fine.
Yeah, yeah. I think it teaches us to be responsible and independent and navigate things on your own. Um,
Hmm.
I've had to figure it out as a young child. So that's
Yes.
why I go after these crazy career options.
Well, I'm with you. I do the same thing. So. I just can't seem to stop. I don't
Right,
want anything that's run-of-the-mill and ordinary. Even in medicine, I still had to have my own practice and I had
right.
my own med spa. I created my own product line too, so I kind of know what you're talking
Oh,
about,
that's
the
yeah.
10,000 units and all of that, and how much work goes into it. And then you're bringing all this product in, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die with this and the whole thing. So you got married after obviously being in the United States a while, and your husband was American, correct?
My ex-husband was American.
Ex-husband, sorry,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then was there difficulties with the culture in the marriage? Because sometimes that can be a thing too.
Yeah, I think when we met at work when I was a banker, and he's in finance as well, and I think in the beginning it didn't seem like there was much of a difference because I am pretty Americanized. I grew up
Mhm.
here, and but anyone that I was with had to be able to eat Vietnamese food. That was one of my criteria. Like
That's
you
so funny.
can't eat fish sauce or Vietnamamese food. Like that's
I
not
say the same thing. I'm like, you know what? If they can't eat spicy food, we're just like, let's not
right,
even go
right.
there. Let's just not.
Yeah. So luckily, that part was all fine. But I think as you get older, there are some, I think there's some more deep rooted and not obvious things that separated us culturally. And I think
Mhm.
I think for me, it's how you spend money. I'm actually was the one that was a little bit more frugal, and I don't know. I think there were just things that's even for me to this day it's hard to describe. But
Yeah.
I
I asked that question purposefully because I would say that I've experienced the same thing. I
right,
would say, again, like you, I'm very Americanized. So very easy for me to obviously be with, my ex-husband was American, but, part Italian. So, but still, I think there was just some disconnect on a deeper level. Like there was, for what I understood was that there was a lack of understanding of what immigrants go through. I would
right,
say for me, that was the big thing that I noticed in my relationship.
right,
And, I was with somebody after that for 2.5 years, and I would say the same thing happened. There was this lack of understanding of what it's like to be, from another culture, from another country. And not that it's this big permeating thing in my life, but I don't know. I agree with you. I don't even know if I know how to explain it correctly.
right,
There is some undercurrent of something that makes it a little difficult. And I don't think that's to say that that will happen in every
right,
relationship either. I do not believe that at all. But
right.
for me now, I understand that for example, there are certain parts of my culture that sometimes is a little not with my ex-husband as much because we were together a really long time, like
Yeah,
27. But I would say that in the other relationship, there were things I just wouldn't share because
right,
I felt weird about it for whatever reason. And now I understand that for me, that means something. That
right.
I can't be around somebody or even be in a relationship with somebody that I feel weird about anything related to my culture because that's a part of me and I shouldn't feel weird. So I don't know if that was within me or, I don't even know the answer to that, but it's interesting.
It is, and I think it comes down to we have to accept and learn about ourselves and how we feel about our culture. Because to be honest with you, I think because I was the youngest of all of my cousins, they kind of growing up, they always kind of looked at me like, "Oh, you're so Americanized, right?" And they would say
Mhm.
things like, "You're whitewashed," or so and, and it was very hurtful things or sometimes even now pitching like my sauces are Vietnamese sauces, and because I don't have an accent, and I, then sometimes Vietnamese people feel, like I'm too Americanized, or American people feel like, oh, you're Vietnamese, or like we're different. So I think just getting to really knowing who you are, and
Right.
and loving yourself for it. I think that's the key, because don't care I don't care what people think of me, like whether you think I'm too American or too Vietnamese, or like I am who I am. Like I love
Yeah.
Vietnamese food. I love my culture. Maybe I don't know all the details of the culture like some people
Right.
do, that grew up with parents that really shared the culture and embraced it. I didn't really have any of that growing up. And
Hmm.
so, but it's not too late for me to learn the things I want to learn and share that with my kids so that they learn about their heritage. And I think that's the most important piece of it all.
I would agree with you, and you made some really important points. And the ones I'd like to touch on is just that we do have to get to a place where we love and accept ourselves. So going back to what I said earlier, back during that relationship, I would say that I didn't really accept parts of me that were I didn't feel as okay about it. I would say that I don't think I would do the same thing moving forward now.
Right.
Interestingly enough, do you know, I've always said my name incorrectly in order to fit in with the American culture. So
Mhm.
I made my name Kalpana because that's when I was in New York City, that's what people could say. So
Oh,
I, instead of insisting and making a scene about how the proper way is, I
mhm.
just changed it to Kalpana. And it's so funny because one of my friends from high school, when I started the show and I moved to California, I said, you know what? This is a fresh start for me. I'm going to say my name correctly, and I'm going to insist that people say my name correctly
Right.
because it's a part of who I am. And I am now really comfortable with being an Indian and an American and
Right.
bridging that line, towing that line, however that may be.
Right.
So interestingly enough, my friends from high school were like, we've been saying your name wrong for 20 years. And I never told them. So when I started doing the show is when they found out, because I
Yeah.
now introduce myself as Dr. Kalpana Sundar, and I used to
Oh.
say Kalpana. So it's just
Oh, yeah.
funny what we'll do just to fit into our surroundings so we
Yeah.
don't feel like we're different. Because the same thing happened to me. I'm too American for the Indians, and I'm too
Mhm.
Indian sometimes for certain Americans. But you know
Right.
what? There's a group of people that think we are just right, and those are
Right.
our friends and the people that we are around.
Yeah, you just got to be yourself, and you'll attract people that appreciate you for who you are, right? And
Yes.
so, that goes into the whole dating realm too.
Oh yeah.
I tell people, just you got to just be true to who you are, and you'll attract the right person. And and along with friendships, like when you go through things like I've gone through, like divorce, whether it's first to getting married, to having children, and divorce, um, all those major life events, I've lost friends, people who I thought I was very close with, and
Hmm.
it hurts and it's painful. And I think now, it's always going to hurt, but I don't take it so personal anymore. Right now,
I
it's
would
like,
agree.
it's everyone has their own sufferings, and maybe there is something in my journey that is triggering them that they
Hmm.
can't work through, and they can't be around something that's going to trigger them because they're not ready to deal with it.
Hmm.
So, but at the end of the day, we just have to be true to who we are, as a person and as our culture. It's like you don't have to eat fish sauce to be my friend.
But apparently, to marry you, you do though.
Marry me, yes.
In order to be married to one, you do have to eat Vietnamese food.
Yes.
Well, thank God, Dr. Ted is eating Vietnamese food, so we're good.
Dr. Ted eats crazier stuff than I do.
I love it. I love it. Well, I have to tell you, I feel like our lives are on such parallel because so much. I mean, we have kind of a basic conversation before, but as
Yeah,
we dive deep into it, so many similarities because
okay,
I also have gone through periods of my life where I've really lost a lot of people. And
right.
it's often when I'm transitioning into a better, more, well, I don't want to say better, but I would say a more authentic. So, yeah, more
Yeah,
authentic equals better in my book, honestly.
yeah.
So, as I'm transitioning into a more authentic version of myself, I have lost people along the way because they just can't deal with it. I say we vibrate out of each other's lives. So, it's nothing. And when
Absolutely.
I look at it like that it's an energetic vibration that used to match and now it doesn't match anymore,
Yes,
it kind of takes the emotion out of it.
it does.
So
It
that's what I've been doing, and it makes it, I can't say it's not painful, but it's a heck of a lot less painful than the other head trash that used to go on inside my head before.
right. Like, what's wrong with me?
Yes.
Why don't
Oh, it's
I love
because I'm this or I'm
right?
that, and
Yeah.
the head trash. So I love that now I just say, oh, we're not vibrating at the same frequency. It's okay. It's all
Right.
right. Everybody has the right to live their life in the way that they want.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting. And it really is not an easy thing to grow up in from a different culture in America. Although this is a great country that welcomes all kinds of diversity. I remember being so embarrassed when
Mhm.
my mom would wear a sari. And now I just think it's the stupidest thing because saris are so beautiful.
Oh
But
my gosh, I love saris. I
but I
love
was
saris. Yeah.
mortified,
Yeah.
mortified with the capital M. And, I mean, I was young, maybe,
Mhm.
elementary school or something. And she would be standing out there at the bus stop with the sari and the bindi. And oh
Mhm.
God, I just get made so much fun of. I mean, people made fun of me and I didn't want that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh, what's the dot on the head? Blah, blah. I'm like, oh my God, I just want to have a normal day and not be asked these questions.
Right. Right.
But, it's hard as a child, but thank goodness as we get older, we start to accept ourselves. And it's so beautiful because once you actually own yourself and accept yourself,
Right.
it's amazing how nobody can hurt you.
Right, absolutely. I think it's the hurt's different. It's like, there are things that still hurt me, especially when it comes to my own mother, but that's which, I'm not ready to unpack, but it hurts, but at the same time, I know in my heart, I know who I am, I know my intentions, and even if it's family, you can't pretend to be someone you're not. You you
100%.
know, you can't give in and do something that doesn't feel good or is inauthentic to you.
Right.
Or let people treat you a certain way. That's not okay, right?
100%. And I think at this point in my life, I'm so committed to my authenticity that I'm really willing to walk away from whoever or whatever is not authentic to me. And I know that may, to a lot of the people watching, may seem really, crass or, uncaring. And it's not really about that, but it's just that I find it. I find that I feel sick. I mean, just like when you're eating those sauces, you feel
Mhm.
sick when they're not of the right ingredients.
Yeah.
Feel like the same thing happens to me when I'm not around the right people who appreciate who I really am. I
Mhm.
actually feel sick inside. So to me, it's not worth that.
It's not, and it drains your energy, don't you think? It's like so tiring to try to pretend around people and kind of go with whatever there's, if they can't accept you for who you are, it's energy draining, and
100%.
it's good to be
100%.
with people where you can lift them and they can lift you up. So
Right.
we don't have a lot of time, It's like, like that's
We,
my thing. Like, hey, if I don't enjoy your company, it's like I don't dislike you. I save my energy, and I've learned to
right.
say no to things that are not good for me.
Right. Because again, you do feel one way when you're around people who light you up, and you feel a different way around people who don't. And honestly, it really goes for family too. I mean, I
Yes,
have family members that just drain me. And I don't
yeah.
even have a big family, so there's not a lot to choose from. But
I'm the same. I'm the same. And sometimes family are the people that you find in your life. They don't
yes.
necessarily have to be related. And so I think for me, that's kind of been the story of my whole life. Is I've always found my created my own family,
Hmm.
except for my daughters. My daughters
Of
are
course. Well, that's a whole different thing.
my loves.
Yeah, yeah, that's a whole different scenario. That's not the, but it's really cool because, sometimes even your children cannot really accept who you are to a certain
Yes,
degree. And it sounds like you're blessed that they'll accept you for who you are. I'm very blessed in that same
yes.
way. My children just whatever I do, they're like, "Oh, that's great, mom. Go for it."
Oh, I love that. And how old are
Very
your
supportive.
kids again?
So I have a 25-year-old and a 22-year-old.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, and they're just very open-minded and just, they whatever I want to do is like fine with them. They don't have any judgment, but I think that comes from me not being judgmental about how they live their life
I
because
was just gonna say
yeah,
that
because I
you
had
wouldn't
that.
repeat the same pattern, right?
Right. Because I was judged and I felt like I had to live my life in a very prescribed way. And I didn't really enjoy how that felt for me. So now, when I raised my children, I was like, you know what? Listen, I just want you to be a good human being and I want you to be happy. Whatever that looks like, I'm going to support you. So, if you don't like what you're doing in your career, change it. If you don't like who you're around, change it. Like, I'm okay with that. And they've watched me just change, change, change. So I think they feel pretty comfortable about what that looks like. They've just seen me
Right.
do so many things in my life. So,
Absolutely. Like like my life is different than my life was 5 years ago.
oh
And
yeah.
I had so many people like text me, they're like, oh my gosh, you have like this whole new life now. And I do. I mean, you can reinvent yourself and create different versions of yourself at any age. Like, did I ever think I was gonna start a new business in my 40s? No.
But is there an age? I mean,
There's no age. There's
doesn't
no
matter.
age limit, and it doesn't matter. Yeah. And I
Well,
love that my kids see that you can pick a path and make decisions, but hey, when it doesn't serve you anymore, it's okay to pivot and to do something else and move on. You don't have to force yourself to stick with it, and that's the same with relationships. It doesn't have to be
100%.
so bad or we're like terrible or abusive. If you're just not feeling it, you feel like you're just not, like you said, aligned anymore, then
Mhm.
it's just time to move on, right? And
Well,
that's okay.
I feel like in our society, we get sort of locked into playing it safe.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one. And I feel like when we play things too safe, we stay small. So we're
Right,
not able to expand into the version of ourselves that is truly authentic and
right,
fulfilling because
right.
we're busy playing it safe and being really small and contained. So I think that's really important to say. And then, second, I think that, when we play small, it makes other people comfortable for
Yeah,
some so as we expand, we will often find the people who are not comfortable with our expansion leave our lives.
absolutely, 1,000%. I couldn't have said it better.
And the other thing I think is big is that we're also trained to never quit. Like you always hear that, like never quit, never quit, never quit. And I'm a big proponent now for quitting crap that doesn't serve me, or it allows me to try a lot of different things. And then if it doesn't feel right, or if it doesn't light me up, again, life is too short to do
Yes.
stuff that isn't lighting you up. So then I'm like, well, I'm going to quit. And it's okay.
I stopped reading books, and I used to never do that. I would just power through it and force myself, and I spent hours, and then afterwards, I'm like, that book really sucked.
Exactly. Or movies, like
Or
you'll,
movies, and now I'm like, you know what? If it's like almost halfway in and it still sucks, I'm
Mhm,
just gonna abandon it because that's my time
mhm.
that I get to bring back for myself to do something else.
Exactly. And it's funny because when we think about resources, I think so many of us are really consumed with like, resources being about money. But I have to say that over and over again, I see that our most valuable resources are our health and our time, both
Yeah.
of which we talked about today. Because
Yes.
if you don't have your health, I don't care how much money you have, you're never going to be able to enjoy it. And if you don't have time and if you don't use that wisely, you really don't have that quality of life. So yes, I agree with you. I abandon things in the middle. That isn't so exciting. I think I'll not read that book. Or sometimes I start reading a book that I could tell has some really salient points, but I can always go back and look at it when I want. But it's nothing
Yeah,
that I have to read fully.
right, right. I know. I have a book like that now. I'm like, oh yeah, I just read the summary and
Hopefully, it's not mine. That would be embarrassing. Well, it's funny because I've read so many books like that that
yeah,
my book was kind of on the short side, but I was like, I don't care to make it longer. I wanted to feel like they got a lot out of it, but it
yeah,
was a short, easy read. I would say it's a short, easy read, but I feel that it has a lot of important points in it.
right,
So you may go back and like think about those topics later, but it's not
yeah.
incredibly long. And I remember finishing it, feeling like, I feel like it should be twice as long, but I'm like, I don't feel like filling it with a bunch of fluff, so forget it. It is what it is.
It's better that way. I can't read books with like the. It's like okay, they've said this over and over. Like it's the same thing over and over. So
Yeah, yeah. And it's true because our time is limited and we have a lot of things being our time, our mental, people are pawing at it. Like there's
right,
podcasts, there's this, that you really have to like something for you to really stick with it. And
absolutely,
honestly, I've tried a lot of things throughout my life too. And, many of them I just tried just for the experience, but it wasn't anything I wanted to continue doing forever for
right.
whatever reason. I had numerous reasons for probably stopping things. And then some things I feel like maybe at a different time in my life, I would go back to. Other things I'm like, glad I had the experience, but don't want to do that again.
Right, right.
I feel like that about skiing. Like, I never want to do that again.
That's okay.
I was like, "Ooh." I was like, I don't know. I don't know if you ski,
I
but
love to ski.
oh, okay.
But
So,
that's okay. And
well, let me tell you, I am a fabulous skier when I'm on the bunny slope. I'm like, why can't we just stay here? I'm really good here. The
yeah.
minute I go up in that mountain, I'm like, oh, I'm scared.
Yeah. And if you like I learned how to ski when I was 18. And I don't know, I just felt it was very scary. I remember being very scared. But somehow I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the scenery, and so
It is beautiful.
I've been skiing ever since, and it is one of my favorite. But it's okay.
Yeah, and that's the
I
thing.
can
I
see,
mean,
my oldest daughter doesn't like to ski. Like she's an amazing skier. She's been skiing since she was 3. She was in ski school, like the whole thing. And she told me, she's like, I really don't like to ski. And so now I'll ski, on vacations when they're with their dad because I don't need to force her because
mhm,
it's a lot. Not only is it expensive, like just like
mhm.
the clothes, like it's a process and you have to heft all the stuff and climb up the mountain. It's some
Yeah,
work. And, later on, if she wants to revisit it with her friends or whatever, then she can. But I feel like I don't want to force her to do it. Like something
yeah.
on my
It, it's not helpful.
Yeah,
She's only going to hate it more if you force her anyway.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
to me, there's an equation that goes on inside my head. It's like, of course, any new thing that you do is going to be some amount of scary and
Right.
instill some fear, which is fine. I know that. But I feel like there has to be almost as much enjoyment
Oh yeah, there
with
has to
doing
be.
it.
Hmm.
So when I first started water skiing, I felt that too. Like there was some fear around it, but God, the exhilaration and the enjoyment was massive to the point where, maybe it was
Oh,
equal in the beginning. Like, oh yeah, the fear and exhilaration are about the same, but
yeah.
over time, the fear decreased, the exhilaration increased. So I was like, well, that's a good formula for happiness. But with skiing, it's always been like sheer peril and very, very little enjoyment.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not the thing for me.
And like I love what you said. It's like you just try new things. you know, and that's what I encourage my kids to do. Like, hey, just try different things, try different foods.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't like it, it's okay.
It's
It's okay.
okay.
You
Yeah.
know, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of exploring like different curiosities, right? Like just
Right.
new experiences. And, you know, if I take a pottery class, I'm probably not going to go back and be a pottery maker or anything crazy.
Right. But at least you tried it.
But you know, you try it.
But it expands our way of thinking. The
Yes.
more things we try, one thing I've noticed with all the different things I've tried is that I am now starting to make connections between things that I'm like
Yeah.
doing. So I'm like, oh, well, you know what? I did this and I did this, and it's kind of similar to this. And I feel it just expands our horizons. And not to brag, but I went to a video arcade with some friends a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
and I crushed it on those video games
That's
because I
awesome.
drove on the racetrack, so when I'm doing it on a video game, it really
Yeah.
wasn't. Oh, it was a lot easier than driving on the racetrack because I wasn't
Yeah.
going to get my car wasn't going to get messed up, so
Yeah.
it was a lot easier. But I was like, wow, I'm actually kind of good at this,
That's
and
so
so it's
cool.
interesting how those parallels show up in video games. And I've got really good hand-eye coordination from being a surgeon, so I was like,
Yeah.
so then apparently there's a thing called, what is it called? Twitch or something? That people literally play video games and get paid money. I'm like, what? It's like, what? Now I'm starting to rethink
Hey,
my
it might
career
be another
choices.
stream of income for you.
I was literally telling him, I was like, what? This is a thing? And then I'm thinking back to all those days where my parents used to yell at me for playing too many video games. And
Yeah.
I could have just flat out told them, listen, this is my income stream. I feel like people would want to watch a middle-aged woman play video games. Why not?
That's so fun. I love
The
it.
I tell you, the world is so different than what it used to be. I mean, back when I grew up, I mean, there was only a certain amount of professions and things that one could do.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's what I tell my kids all the time. I'm like, you know what? Doesn't matter. You could figure something out
Yeah.
that works within the confines of things you enjoy, hopefully removing as many of the things you don't enjoy. You can create your own job in this day and age, which it's just a truly fascinating time to live in.
It
I
is.
mean, this didn't exist when I was a kid.
Right. Right. And then, you know, before when I was younger, I remember thinking like 40s is so like old, you know,
Oh
50s.
yeah.
You're like, you know, people like don't go out. Like you go to work, you come home, you eat dinner, and then you sit in front of the TV. Like that's kind of like how I was raised. Like that, you don't have a
Yep.
social life, you don't play sports. And now it's like, you know, I mean, it's amazing. I have friends of all varying ages, and my friends in their like 60s are just so active, like so social. They're always out, they're playing pickleball and tennis and golf and like, you know, traveling and doing all these
Yep.
things and
It's
healthy. And even
so different.
myself, like if you told me my 20s that in your 40s you're gonna play tennis and golf and do all these things and start a new business, I've been like, what? I actually wanted to have that traditional life when I was younger. I wanted to get
Mm. Because
married.
it's what you saw.
It's what I saw was the ultimate successful life. You know, is
Hmm.
what I was told. Like you get married, you go to college, you graduate, you get a corporate job,
Hmm.
you get married, you have children, and then you buy a fancy big house. Like that was the pinnacle. Like that's the happily ever after. You know,
Right.
and
I
today,
think now as a society, many of us are really consciously shifting out of that mindset and
absolutely,
redefining success
yeah,
into, I would say it's different for each person what that looks like.
absolutely,
And
absolutely,
it should be, but
it should
forget
be
this prescribed version of success, which
right.
I don't know. I did all that and I
Yeah.
thought it sucked, frankly. I just sucked.
Yeah, so I remember like having all that in this big house, and I'm like, oh, it's so much maintenance. I'm like, I literally live in like three parts of the house, right?
Yes.
And but maintain all of it. And I don't know. It was like after 12 years, I'm just like, gosh, like this is not what I thought it would be.
Right.
It didn't
Well,
give me the happiness that I thought it would bring.
Well, I think that I read in a book recently, one that I actually finished a lot of, that 40 is a real turning point for people, where
Yeah.
we just start to redefine our values and what really matters to us. And it was around then when I kind of had this, I like to call it a midlife awakening, not a midlife
Yes.
crisis,
It's an
because
awakening. It
yeah, I
really
just
is.
felt like I was understanding better what I really wanted out of my life.
Mhm.
And it just really is different from what things used to be and what people used to want. And I would
Exactly.
say that each person has the ability to create their own reality the way they want, and it doesn't have to look like anybody else's. I
It
mean, I don't
does.
know who created this idea of success, but I don't know.
Yeah. No,
Wasn't the best of
I love
ideas.
it. I love it. And I think it's teaching that to my kids at a young age too.
Hmm.
I think is really important to me. And I think that they see that I'm happier now than before. And our relationship after my divorce, I'm much closer to them now. We have a much better relationship. And it's when you live authentically, it helps everyone around you, you
It
know?
really does. And I'm so glad you said that because I've had this exact same experience with my children. They both have told me that they really feel like I actually interviewed my son on the show a couple of like on
Oh,
Mother's Day actually. So he
oh,
said the same thing. He said, I really feel like I know you as a person and that was really important. Whereas before, when you were married, I just didn't feel like I really knew who you were. So our happiness does have a significant impact on the happiness of our children. So I bring all these points out just to show that there's other ways of thinking about things other than the old dogmas that existed, 25 years ago.
right, right.
Oh my God. Well, this has been so enjoyable.
Oh
I
my
think
gosh.
I think my cheeks hurt a little bit. I feel like we're definitely sisters from another mystery.
Oh,
Our
yeah.
lives are so parallel, crazy.
Right. And I love it. I love meeting other women who, have kind of gone through similar stories or just like, similar expectations. I think there, even today, there's still a lot of women out there that maybe are going through what were going through and feel alone
Yeah.
and feel like they're, like, oh, what do I do? Where do I go from here? Like, I'm too scared to make a change, And I tell them I'm not pro divorce by any means or
No,
anything like
no,
that.
but
But
sometimes a change needs to be
whether
made
it's
for
a
your
career
greater good.
or it's like, hey, like I want to start working out. I don't know where to start. It's
Right.
like, just really taking that first step and really getting to know who you are as a person. And, and there are going to be some ups and downs in that process.
Absolutely.
But that's
Well, and I have
normal.
to say, I'm excited to see your progress and watch your company grow. Thank you so much for
Oh,
being here today.
thank you. Thank
And
you so much for having me.
I want to see Wynn's kitchen sauces everywhere
Oh,
personally. So
thank you. I appreciate it
much
so
love, much success, and have a great evening.
much. Have a great evening. Bye.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. She is a really sweet person. So if you live in the California, San Diego area, definitely keep an eye out in our local stores because you will find those sauces everywhere. So next week, I'm going to be interviewing Daniel Alexa. He is actually a life coach. He's a hypnotherapist. He's an author, and he has a really interesting take on fear and trust. So we're going to get into that conversation next week. So definitely stay tuned. So, a little shameless plug from yours truly. I would love to have you guys visit my YouTube channel, and there's the QR code on the screen because I have been putting out content. Not only can you see episodes of the show on my YouTube channel, but you can see other content that I post as well. So I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday evening. And this is Dr. Kalpana Sundar, the host of Gloves Off, and I can't wait to see you guys next week.